Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Student Spotlight series, where we showcase some of the work our past students have done. Today it is our pleasure to have with us Yeonjae Kim. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what year of school you're in, and what course you've taken with CCIR?
Yeah, hi, my name is Yeonjae Kim, and I'm a student from South Korea. I go to Seoul International School, and I'm currently in 11th grade. And the course I took in CCIR was Cognitive Psychology, the Building Blocks of Human Intelligence.
Okay, great. So was this the Future Scholars Program?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me how you became interested in the program?
I gained interest in the program because when I attended it, when I signed up for it last year, I started gaining interest in research and conducting my own research and writing my own paper in general. And while I was like researching different programs, I found CCIR also because Cambridge is like a well-known university as well. So I became interested in conducting my own research as well through a program.
Mm-hmm. And did you have a particular interest in like cognitive science or philosophy of mind, or how did you choose this particular course?
Yeah, definitely. I think starting when I started high school, I started gaining interest in the field of psychology and I guess more generally about like cognitive thinking as well. So I decided to sign up for different psychology courses and I was luckily able to attend this one.
Mhm. So can you say a little bit about how the course was structured and what maybe the sort of main takeaways were or kind of learning goals were?
hmm So the course was basically, we would have two classes each week. The first class would be a lecture with our professor in like a small group, and we would talk about different topics in cognitive psychology. For example, we learned about memory or attention and different like learning processes. And then the next class, we would have a group meeting with our TA, and we would start working on our draft for a paper. She helped us to create a research question, a thesis, and learn about like the structure of our paper as well.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, who was the professor?
Her, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but Dr. Helena Sukovic. I'm not sure. She's from the University of Oxford, but yeah.
Okay, great. So what was your research project? Oh,
My research project was about um, how sports injuries can cause different cognitive and psychological responses for different athletes.
mhm. So how did you choose that topic?
I chose this topic because I think the main reason was because I had an interest in sports as well as an interest in psychology. So I thought kind of merging the topics together and producing my own paper would be really interesting.
Mhm.
And I initially wanted to maybe even include my own personal experiences as well as an athlete who has been injured. So yeah, that's why I gained like more interest in the topic and I wanted to know whether or not like people were also all like commonly feeling similar like emotions after an injury as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that sounds like a great topic and a great way to sort of combine your interests. What were the key takeaways at the end of the process?
Yeah, so I think the main takeaway that I had in my paper itself was determining like the different types of emotions that athletes like experience post-injury and throughout the rehabilitation process. Some of the emotions that I analyzed were like anxiety, anger, grief, and like hopelessness, as well as fear, and lastly, like optimism.
Mhm.
So I kind of found out that people generally experience negative emotions like initially when they start entering the rehabilitation process, and it can like often expand into more serious issues such as depression or eating disorders as well. However, towards the end of your recovery process, people start ultimately these emotions start changing towards like more positive emotions such as optimism and acceptance, and the injury often starts recovering faster towards the end, and that's how they're able to mentally recover and return back to their sport.
So you mentioned that you wanted to see if other athletes were experiencing
Mhm.
emotions similar to the ones that you experienced when you had an
Yeah.
injury. Was that reflected in your findings? Did you feel like people were experiencing the things that you experienced, or did you feel like you encountered differences that were interesting?
I think definitely that some aspects are really similar, like the fact that you start off with more negative emotions when you're initially hurt, and kind of starting to feel even worse and more hopeless definitely was reflected through my research. However, I think maybe one difference could have been that definitely the literature that I research were like focused mainly on like professional athletes who kind of their athletic career is basically their entire life,
Right.
and it like kind of like is the meaning of their life. So I think definitely they take sports much more seriously than me. So obviously the level of the emotions that they feel may be more extreme than mine.
I see. So this is kind of a related question then. Was there anything that surprised you when you were doing the work?
Um, I think one thing that was surprising was that I definitely thought that there would only, when you're initially hurt, obviously, because it's not something that you expect or something that you would like want to happen. I thought that everybody would obviously just feel negative about their injury and often not be able to like recover and return back to the athlete that they were. But I think some sources actually provided like a counter argument saying that you off after like the rehabilitation process starts to speed up, people often start feeling more positive and more motivated as they go to like each session of rehabilitation. So definitely there are some cases where people start recovering much faster and are more optimistic and kind of improve and have like a learning lesson from this injury. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. This might be outside of the scope of your research, but did you find any causal relationship there in the sense that was it the case that people who felt more positively experienced more positive outcomes, or is it just a correlation?
Um, I think I think it was kind of like, I guess there was sort of a correlation between how if you're more optimistic during the recovery process, the emotional response benefited the athlete much more in their recovery, and they were able to recover much faster. And when they had increased levels of acceptance, there were definitely studies that proved that there were lower rates of like depression among these athletes. So yeah, I think there was correlation.
Was there any connection to the severity of the injury? I guess did you see in any way how maybe the severity of the injury impacts that kind of emotional, emotional curve you kind of describe throughout the recovery process?
Um, I didn't like specifically go into the different types of injuries because most of the studies that I read or like used for my research were kind of more about serious injuries, not like the common injuries that we would go through or experience. So I think all of the studies that I used definitely had like a certain level of severity.
Mm-hmm. Were there any differences between sports or?
Um, sports specific, I didn't specifically determine like the different emotional responses for different types of sports in my research.
Yeah, I suppose maybe I should have asked this question earlier because I suppose at bottom these are kind of methodology questions. What was your method? How did you sort of define the scope of your project?
Yeah. So the research method that I used for my paper was a literature review. And for my literature review, I generally found like literature from more like academic databases. Um, and I used different types of journals as well, scholarly journals. And I think I started my research off more like in a broader sense. I searched up like keywords such as like different psychological responses or the mental recovery for like athletes. So that's how I kind of initially chose like specific sources that I wanted.
Mhm.
And from there, I definitely tried to focus on sources that were happening like recently so that I could like generally see the trend of different emotions in recent years rather than more of in the past. Um, yeah, and I think generally my sources may have been a bit more broader in the sense that I try to examine different fields of sports and different areas.
Mhm. So you mentioned that you wanted to focus on more recent publications. Did you see
Mhm.
that there was any sort of difference in how, I guess, in the results that older studies found?
Yeah, I think the recent ones definitely prove that because the severity of injuries kind of may increase as there are different like sports also kind of develop and there are different like more severe sports that people play as well. So I think definitely and because there are much more higher expectations for these athletes, nowadays, definitely there was like an increasing trend of more like depression rates and athletes definitely feeling more anxiety
Mhm.
because of these injuries. So the negative emotions may have been like more stronger.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so sports is kind of an interest of mine as well. And one thing that people talk a lot about, at least as it relates to basketball, but I think this is almost a universal trend, is just that like the youth development programs in major sports are much more intensive now than they used to be. So you have kids that like play basketball year round or football year round when it used to be just a seasonal kind of thing. And
Mhm.
I've read some research that suggests that this may contribute to increased rates of injury for young
Mhm.
athletes. So on the one hand, it seems like as you were saying, the level of expectations, the level of competition, just even in the youth phase of these sports, might contribute to greater anxiety and more chance of injury and more severe injuries. Um, but on the other hand, it also seems like our rehabilitation techniques are getting better and better. Like so, it used to be the case that tearing an ACL could seriously derail an athlete's career, whereas now in many sports, it's expected almost that athletes will make pretty much a full recovery from an ACL tear. So on the
Mhm.
one hand, it seems like, as you were pointing out, there are a lot of factors that seem to that have the potential to increase the likelihood of injury and also maybe the negative emotions associated with injury. But on the other hand, maybe it also seems like there are factors that maybe would give athletes more reason to be hopeful about treatment outcomes. I don't know if that's something that maybe was touched on in the studies, but it seems like an interesting dynamic. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I definitely agree with what you were saying. How definitely like competition increases and expectations because people kind of focus their entire lives on on sports. And I think that was one of the sources that I actually um research, but and I used in my paper as well. But it talked about how athletes once they're injured, the negative emotions are really strong, and they often struggle to like return back to their sport because sports is kind of their entire meaning of their life,
Mhm.
and they kind of think that if they're injured, they kind of don't have like another way out of their life, so they kind of lose purpose as well, and that kind of feeds into their emotional responses becoming more severe and negative, and them often like denying the rehabilitation process, and this often, yeah, definitely like extends the rehabilitation and recovery process, and it often like leads to like a downfall in both their physical and mental state, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So in a way that maybe if there is a causal relationship between more positive emotions towards the injury or or the recovery process, um, then if that is connected to, I guess, more engagement with that process, then that would maybe explain there being some kind of causal relationship. Though I guess it would be very hard to establish. Um,
Yeah.
so do you have any plans to either publish the paper or take it to conferences?
Yeah, I'm currently working on editing my paper. I've received like feedback from my professor, my TA, and I think the CCIR like team also provided me with like a feedback form. So I'm currently like reading over that and finalizing my paper.
Gotcha. Can you say a little bit more about the kind of support that you received from your professor and TA and just sort of the writing and editing process?
Yeah, in terms of my professor, because ours was like a group lesson, she didn't have a lot of like one-on-one time with me, so I had to kind of email her and ask her for feedback. She also provided me with like an evaluation report, so she kind of helped me throughout the entire process. Like I would ask her, maybe like what type of research question would be better, whether I should do like a literature review or a narrative review, and she responded to most of my emails. And for my TA, she did like I guess one-on-one talks with us during our meetings. She read through my entire paper. She left like comments on my paper as well. Um, yeah, I think definitely I was able to plan my entire outline, my research question, all of that, because my TA like helped us to figure out like what type of structure we wanted. And lastly, for the CCIR team, I submitted like the feedback form, like evaluation request form, I think, and they sent me my evaluation from my professor as well that also had like feedback on, I guess, how I performed throughout the course. So yeah.
Yeah. So was this your first experience doing independent research?
No.
Okay. But so you came in, so you definitely came in, I guess, with with kind of a skill base. But
Mhm.
do you feel like, what do you feel like maybe, or what aspect of conducting independent research do you feel like the program maybe helped you most with?
Yeah. This wasn't my first time, but it wasn't like I haven't been like doing a lot of research in the past. So definitely this was still one of my first times conducting my own research. And I think the main things that I took away from this course itself was obviously I learned a lot about cognitive psychology through the different lessons, but for the research process, I think I didn't realize that there were so many different types of research question structures that could be taken for different types of reviews. So like a literature review and a narrative review would have a different structure of a question, and the specificity of the question would also be different. So definitely my TA helped me to like understand and learn the different types of structures and figure out and like determine which type of structure would best fit my research question and research topic. So I think definitely we spent like at least like 2 or 3 weeks choosing a research question and structuring it differently so that we could conduct our research more like efficiently. So I think that was a big takeaway for me.
That's great. So do you feel like this program's prepared you to continue doing research in the future? I mean, is that something that you kind of plan to do going forward as you, I guess, go into college?
Yeah, this course definitely helps me to gain more insights on conducting research. It was actually my first time doing a literature review, so I think this course definitely helped me to expand my knowledge on different types of research papers that I could conduct, and maybe even in the future, like it would be fun to conduct my own experiments as well and produce my own research based on that. So I think this course was definitely like a stepping stone for any research that I could conduct in the future in like college as well.
Mhm. Do you feel like this experience gave you any ideas on things that you might want to research in the future?
I definitely want to continue doing research on psychology as well. And there were definitely some different takeaways I had from the course. Maybe even like um, research on different like methods of learning and which one might be the most effective. We definitely learned that during the course. So I think expanding into that field would also be interesting.
So is there anything that you wish that if you were going to talk to someone who is going to take a similar program, do you have any advice that you would give them or something that you wish maybe you had known before starting?
Um, in terms of advice, I think definitely ask a lot of questions to the TA because they're definitely there to like help you out and kind of be like active during the meetings. Like initially when I started, because it was like a group lesson, I was kind of like scared to like speak up because there were other people in there who were definitely like much more experienced than me as well. So I think I was kind of like intimidated to present my research in front of other people. But I think definitely if you kind of like open up and ask a lot of questions, present your ideas, and ask for a lot of feedback, it definitely helps to like improve your paper as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway. I do feel like courage is a huge part of being like an effective student and a good learner.
Mhm.
The best way to learn
Yeah.
is to, well, yeah, it's to put yourself out there and sort of take risks, because like the worst thing that can happen is maybe that you're wrong. And if you're wrong, if you discover that you're wrong, that's an opportunity to learn something.
Mhm.
So do you have any final thoughts about your experience that you'd like to share?
Um, Final thoughts, I think this course was definitely really meaningful to me. I was able to take away a lot in terms of my own research skills, writing abilities, but as well as like different psychological topics. And yeah, I think I will continue to work on my paper as well as any other papers in the future.
That's great. I'm glad you had such a good experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed hearing about your research, and I wish you the best of luck going forward.
Yeah, thank you.